And you know what? If you explore any of the faiths, there is that notion of interconnectivity, that notion that there is only one. Every single one of the faith traditions. It is, in many ways, the ultimate reality.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but no, I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
Thank you, Matt. You know, you asked for that song, you know, you can cry. Imagine. When we think about that vision that John Lennon expresses in that song, imagine. Imagine what the world would be like. Imagine if we could let go of heaven, of earth, of possessions, of our ideas about nationhood, and just live as one. It's a song, a prayer that lies, I believe, in the human heart and has forever. And yet we haven't done a really good job making it happen. I'm sorry, these heels are different heights. We all needed a light moment, right? And you know, we teach in unity that there is one presence and one power. It is our most foundational teaching, is it not? And you know what? If you explore any of the faiths, there is that notion of interconnectivity, that notion that there is only one. Every single one of the faith traditions. It is, in many ways, the ultimate reality. So if this is true, you might wonder what happened. Because it's not what we experience, is it? To answer that question, I want to take you back to the story in Genesis. I'm reading from Genesis 2:18 and 19. This is after the heavens and the earth have been created. And we read, "Then the Lord said, 'It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper and a partner.' So, out of the ground the Lord formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name." You know, I hear this story and I think of this enormously long line of animals. And Adam saying, well, that's a tiger, that's a dolphin, that's an elephant, that's a dog. But it was a momentous time because it helped Adam and us, that same process of delineating things, it helps us make sense of the world. But there's some complexity here. In his book, No Boundary, Ken Wilber speaks about Adam's work, and what he was really doing was drawing boundary lines. He was creating separations that allowed him to recognize the differences between the animals and, for that matter, the plants. And this was successful, and it has carried forward throughout human history, but it's become somewhat overdone. So Ken Wilber says, so successful was this mapping of nature that to this day our lives are largely spent in drawing boundaries. Every decision we make, our every action, our every word, is based on the construction, conscious or unconscious, of boundaries. We do it all the time. And in many ways it's useful, but in many ways it becomes a trap. Ken Wilber goes on and says, the exasperating fact which Adam learned was that every boundary line is also a potential battle line. So that just to draw a boundary is to prepare oneself for conflict. It's a natural process of the human mind to create those boundaries, to create those delineations. But when they become too rigid, we create all kinds of conflict and upheaval and harm in our world. And since our primary teaching is about the oneness of it all, we might be tempted to think all we need to do is stay in oneness consciousness. That underneath it all, we're all connected and we're all the same. But staying there is not so easy, but even more than that, I don't think that it's complete in and of itself. And this is why. That there is this oneness that pervades all of the created universe. But there is also this incredible diversity, these incredible, limitless expressions of that one presence and that one power. And that brings us to our core value of inclusive, which we have defined as creating a safe space that honors the diversity and uniqueness of every person. Creating a safe space in our minds, in our hearts, in our sanctuary, in our hallways, out into the world. What would it be if we created that safe space that truly honored the incredible wonder, the incredible beauty of all of it? This is the thing, we have this idea of oneness, our first principle, and we have this concept of us all being unique expressions of that one presence and one power. Do you notice the paradox? Do you notice how there's this dynamic tension between our first two principles? We might say, well, is it all one? Or is each of us a unique individual? And the answer is yes, right? The answer is yes. And I believe that in order to fully embrace the paradox, and in order to fully adhere to this idea of inclusiveness, we need to embrace the both and, right? And we talked about this last week as well, when we talked about our first core value of spirit-centered. And we talked about being led by source, from which everything begins and ends. First principle. But then if we're going to fully embrace that and show up as expressions of God, we have to embrace the second principle. It's a both and. And last week we went through the behaviors that allow us to live into that value of spirit-centered. And likewise, we have a definition for inclusive, creating a safe space that honors the diversity and uniqueness of every person. And we have a list of practices or behaviors that help us in really being there. So let's explore those, shall we? The first practice, we value the inherent worth and dignity of all beings as expressions of God. You know, we can look around and affirm the value of it all. And for me, the best way to value and honor all of it is gratitude. An ongoing practice of gratitude. You know, if I'm out on a walk and I take the time to notice the sounds, the incredible diversity of the plants, to look into the eyes of someone I pass on the street and just appreciate it all, something shifts. Those boundary lines begin to weaken. And I can really see the value, the dignity, the power in everything as an expression of the infinite, as an expression of God. So, next, we foster an environment that respects and welcomes everyone. Fostering an environment that respects and welcomes everyone. This, to me, is a very, very subtle dance in some ways. We can say we welcome everybody, but are we? What's going on in our consciousness? Anybody ever been, in line at a store and noticed the judgments that are going on in your head? Right? So we have to cultivate this inner welcome. We have to pay attention to those judgments, those criticisms, and really create the space in our hearts that chooses to see each and every person we meet. Valerie Kaur, who's a Sikh American, S-I-K-H, and she's written a couple of books, and she talks a lot about welcoming the stranger. It's a very, very central to the Sikh tradition, welcoming the stranger. And the true welcome is to recognize that everybody you encounter is a part of you. And so when I remember, I try, in the airport or in a store or wherever I am, to try and just see each individual and affirm silently. People might think I'm a little strange if I did it out loud. Silently, you are a part of me I don't yet know. You are a part of me I don't yet know. It really begins to open us up and to see the incredible beauty of each human being we encounter. Another way we can foster an environment that respects and welcomes everyone is when we're here on Sunday morning. There's been a decline here. People get anxious about that. I understand that. But there's a tendency sometimes for people to look around and see who's not here. So rather than taking a head count, I'm going to invite you to take a heart count. as you enter the sanctuary, as you leave, as you move around, choose to really connect with as many people as possible. A real heart connection. Could be just a look in the eyes, or it could be sharing a story with someone. But really just take a moment and open your heart to the people around you. It's also something you can take out into the world, right? And next, we seek to understand and appreciate the lived experiences of others. Some of you know that my husband is black, and sometimes people say to him, well, I don't see color. And I'm like, what does that mean? They wouldn't be able to see that if they didn't see color. But more importantly for me, is you're not really seeing him. That's part of who he is. The people I encounter that are part of the LGBTQ community, that is part of who they are. Those of us that are straight, that's part of who we are. All of this is part of our uniqueness. And here's what I have found. If I really stop and allow myself to be touched by the stories of other people, by their lived experiences, to get to hear from them, how life has affected them, how possibly the color of their skin, or the fact that they grew up in an impoverished environment or a wealthy environment, or they're part of the LGBTQ community. When I open myself to that and hear their stories, it deepens my connection, it deepens my understanding, and it deepens my compassion. If I don't look at my husband and recognize how he's been affected by the color of his skin, I miss a huge part of him. And it's not all bad. You know? I mean, it's allowed him in many ways to rise above adversity. Likewise, those of us that are in light-colored skin, that has affected us in some way. I think sometimes the conversation about inclusivity can be a little uncomfortable, because sometimes we can hear, well, if we take a moment and honor this person who is Asian, or this person who is gay, then it in some way suggests that we're trying to make a substitution. They now belong, and those of us that look like me don't belong. It's not that at all. Inclusivity is all of us together. The incredible richness and the diversity of each and every one of us. And finally, we are deeply enriched as we consciously question our assumptions. Questioning our assumptions. You know, it's so easy to make assumptions and think they're true and to interact with the world as if they're true. But the reality is that our assumptions are too often based on biases or judgments or some crazy thing going on in our heads. And if we can open ourselves up to question them, to look at them a little bit differently, we begin to experience the world a little bit differently, and the people around us a little bit differently. I was on a call with my coach recently, and I was talking about this individual that I was a little bit frustrated by, a little bit annoyed by, and as we proceeded in that conversation, we realized that this person had a very different personality style. They approached things very differently than I did. And, you know, it was like, I probably baffled them. And quite honestly, they baffle me. So what if every time I had that crazy dialogue going in my head, I said, oh, maybe that person finds me just as annoying as I find them. Might loosen things up a little bit. You know, these unconscious assumptions and biases can be so subtle, and when we can move away from them, something truly amazing happens. Many, many years ago when I was in university, there was a young man in one of my classes, and he obviously came from an impoverished background and was very socially withdrawn. And the thing that I found myself avoiding him because his body odor was something I didn't want to be around. But here's the thing. There was one day I just kind of let all that go. And I looked across the room at this young man, and I was overwhelmed by this deep love. And I wonder if I could live inside that kind of awareness. What might happen? Inclusivity has been a topic that has come up since my time in this community. And there's been some discomfort with it because it can be very tender. It can be uncomfortable as we try and navigate our differences. But I think it's vital that we're willing to do that. You will hear a little bit more about this later, but we are offering 2 webinars. They're 2 Tuesday nights. It's a part 1 and a part 2. It's really an opportunity for us to dig deep and to consider how we can truly welcome the other and be in those uncomfortable conversations. So I invite you to sign up for those. You have to sign up. You get the Zoom link. And in closing, I'd like to go back to Matt's beautiful rendition. If you could just sing a few lines from Imagine.
Which worked out well for me because I couldn't decide whether to wear the navy or the white. Anyway, that's because, as you know, it's wear 2 different shoes today, Sunday. And last Sunday, maybe if you were here, you noticed it was Beach Bum Sunday, and it generated many smiles and hugs. And so now next week is Crazy Hat Sunday, and you know what to do. You have to do it. So let's keep the fun rolling along. Okay, so the transition team is hosting the focus groups to explore how we can fully live our vision, mission, and core values and work co-creatively to build the future of our church, UCOH. These groups are limited to 12 participants, so registration is essential. You should register for only one group. Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., there will be a Zoom group meeting, and 2 more in-person groups will meet next Sunday, July 21st at 1 p.m. Join Anaya in Friendship Hall Tuesday, July 16th at 7:15 for Cacao Circle Gathering. And you can check the UCOH calendar for registration information. You can also register now for Reforming Relationships webinar retreat. And it is Zoom only, and it's 2 Tuesdays, July 23rd and July 30th at 6 p.m. This two-part workshop explores the work of reforming relationships so that we can live our teachings of oneness more deeply. You can register online to get the Zoom link. Next Sunday for our 8:30 service, grab a cup of coffee and a pastry, as always, and join Tammy Lorraine in the Legacy Suite or on Facebook for her talk about spirit-centered life as we continue with our coverage about our core values. And at 11 o'clock, Reverend Emma Jane Conley gets to the core of our core value of loving and looks at the many ways our loving shows up at our spiritual community. And join in the sanctuary or online, and have a wonderful Sunday. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.